All right, welcome back, Better Everyday Podcast listeners. I am your host, Brad Weems. Today, I'm here with Dr. Sean Pastuch. So, if you're an avid listener of the podcast, Sean and we hopped on a podcast a couple months ago, and just some miscommunication. Um, I thought he was on mine. He thought I was on his. We really didn't know what was going on. So we just kind of shot from the hip and just had a good, hour and a half long conversation. So today I wanted to formally have him on the Better Everyday Podcast listener and just learn a little more about Dr. Sean. So, Dr. Sean, how's it going?
It's going well, Brad. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no problem. So one of my favorite podcasts out there it's a podcast about storytelling, um, the life of entrepreneurs. It's called How I Built This by Guy Raz on NPR. And so I just think you've got a very unique story that a lot of people could benefit from hearing. And you're doing big things. And so why not have you on and just kind of dig deeper into who you are?
I'm excited to potentially tell some stories that I've never told on a podcast before.
That would be great. So, um, anyway, let's start out. You growing up at an early age and kind of like how you got down to this road of becoming a chiropractor and getting into fitness.
I think we go back a lot further than that to set the stage for people.
Let's do it.
And I'll go back to I was literally 3 years old,
Okay.
and this will give people some insight to how I was raised. I was at a day camp because that's what Jewish kids on Long Island do. They go to camps during the day, and I was of the age where I could learn how to swim or not learn how to swim. It all depended on kind of how I responded to things. And we live on an island, right? We live on Long Island, which there's plenty of land on Long Island. Don't get me wrong. You're not falling off into, you know, watering holes here and there accidentally. You can see
Right.
the beach coming. But for my parents, it was very important that I learn how to swim. We had a pool in the backyard, and they wanted to make sure I could swim. So at camp, they gave lessons. And I still remember this. My mom came one day to watch me at my swim lesson. And I kept on standing up. And the instructor said, he's doing a great job kicking on the wall and paddling with paddleboard. But he's not ready to swim yet, we don't think. And she said, well, why not? And I said, well, because every time we ask him to try without anything, he just stands up. And she said,
Mhm.
well, why don't you put him where he can't stand then? And they said, you want us to put him where he can't stand? She said, yeah, you're lifeguards, right? So if he sinks, you'll just pick him up. You can stand there.
Mhm.
Then they brought me into water that was maybe 4 feet deep, and I swam. And that is a microcosm of a lot of what my parents did with me growing up, was putting me in what Jordan Peterson would say, dangerous situations done safely, right? Like let them do
Right.
dangerous things safely. My parents did that with me a lot growing up. And I think that has helped me to weave my way through some difficult times as an adult.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. So you asked how I got into chiropractic and all that. My father and my uncle were chiropractors. They were successful. They did a good job. I had the quintessential American dream growing up. I had nothing. I wanted for nothing. I had two parents who loved me, who were great. My father was my little league coach, my basketball coach. He made it to every event that I ever did. So did my mother. And so I didn't have that hardship as a kid that I think a lot of other people get to or have to experience, depending how you look at it.
Now, were you an only child?
No, I had a
No.
younger sister who is
Okay.
far more athletic than I am, who is better looking than I am, who is cooler than I am, who is more likable than I am. Uh, she's 3 years behind me, and because I played sports in high school, she didn't get her first kiss until I graduated. She didn't get her first boyfriend until all my friends graduated. So her senior year, guys knew, like, all right, these fucking older guys who were watching out for Robin are gone.
Right.
I can talk to her. And yeah, so younger sister. We have a great relationship.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. But so my father and my uncle were chiropractors, and I, you know, I looked up to them. They were successful guys, and I wanted to be like them in some ways and not in others. And so I went down the fitness path first and found myself really frustrated in what personal training could afford people, because I was like, there's every time I take my clients to the physical therapist at the gym, they're just telling me that they're too old for it, or that they got to work around that thing. And I'm like, this sucks. So I went to chiropractic school and I said, I'm going to do this like my father and my uncle. I'm going to save the world through chiropractic. Graduate, get into practice with them, learned that that's not how I like to practice. They were, their patients loved them. They made great money, but it was adjustments, stim, ice, heat, see you Wednesday. And for me, that wasn't inspiring. So I set out on my own and opened my own chiropractic clinic, a CrossFit gym, because that was the financially accessible way that I could do fitness on my own terms and be able to run a clinic. And that was in 2011 when I started all that.
So I want to backtrack just a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
So did you know that you would end up in chiropractic at some point?
No, I thought it was something I absolutely wouldn't do because my father did it. And I have a little bit of what may even be some toxic, rugged individualism in me, where I will choose the harder path simply because I want to make sure that the easier path isn't one that people have an excuse for why, like, oh, well, of course you were successful doing that. You stepped into a successful clinic. And I've allowed that kind of stuff. I've shot myself in the foot on a lot of that kind of stuff where it would have just been like, fuck you. Why wouldn't I take the opportunity that was put in front of me that you absolutely would take that you're complaining wasn't? It doesn't make me any less virtuous. I've made that mistake many times. So for a long time, I did not think I would get to chiropractic.
Okay. So what your dad think whenever you didn't like the way he practiced and you wanted to start a different version of it?
I think my father is mature enough and wise enough to know that I need to make the mistakes myself, and that he can tell me until he's blue in the face, until I experience the mistake, I'm not going to learn from it. And so when I set out to do it on my own, he was fully supportive. At that point, really what it came down to is he's 10 years older than his brother. And when I left in 2011, 2011, I was 33. So my dad was 63. And no, that's not true. 2011, I wasn't 33. 2011, I was 28. So my dad was 58. That makes much more sense. He knew he wasn't going to do this for another 20 years. And he knew it would be me and his brother in practice together if I went into that practice and stayed in that practice. And him and his brother are very different people. They have a lot of the same values and they have some very different values. And I love my uncle. I was texting with him this morning. We would not make good business partners. And so I think that made it easier for my dad to support me in going my own way, because he knew that there wasn't a likely long term with myself and my uncle.
So he's okay with you, going out on your own, but what did he think about you being interested in this CrossFit thing?
He didn't care. It was a small thing, right? Like when you look at something that I think he knew that I didn't at the time, was when you look at the career trajectory and the earning potential and the likelihood of those things happening, right? So we're not talking about the outliers in either. We're talking about the likelies. I could run a CrossFit gym and break even or even lose a little bit of money, and if it was fun for me, it would be fine, right? Because I could I could earn a few $100,000 in a chiropractic clinic every year,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have this cool thing on the side that I like. So I think he saw that and recognized it and didn't really have much concern over it. I also think that he has probably as much or more confidence in me that I have in myself, which means there's a level of belief that I was going to be successful that he held, where, he was in support of whatever I wanted to do. Both
Mm-hmm.
my parents were. They always have been.
So let's talk about your wife. When did you meet her?
I met my wife the last 2 months of senior year of college. So what happened was I was in a fraternity because I got cut from the baseball team twice. And at Maryland, you're either in a fraternity, on a sports team, or waiting until you graduate to meet chicks in the work world, right? And I was not going to wait until I graduated to meet chicks in the work world. So I met my wife senior year of college, about 2 months before graduation, in her sorority kitchen while I was eating lunch with a different girl. And what
Mhm.
happened was my wife walked down the stairs looking like she had just, you know, she had a good night the night before. Let's leave it
Mhm.
at that. And she came downstairs, makeup running down her face, oversized t-shirt, short shorts, and sat down at the table across from us. And she's like, oh, I just woke up. I'm like, who is this chick? Like, why are you sitting with us right now? You're a mess. You're like, don't you girls want to like make yourselves up a little bit before you come downstairs and see guys? And she was like, no, no, I don't care about you at all. And so I was immediately attracted to her.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So what
Uh,
about the other chick?
that was actually I wasn't hooking up with the other chick. There was nothing going on there that was romantic. She was a friend.
Oh,
We were in
okay.
classes together, and I'll give you a little more lay of the land. At University of Maryland, there's fraternity houses and sorority houses, and anywhere from 30 to 60 people live in these, and all of them have a kitchen with a chef, right? So that they're not necessarily good chefs, okay, but someone cooks food on something hot,
Okay.
and the sorority houses, like they weren't tracking how much food they went through. So you could go in there and get a free meal. So I would have, lunch at Theta on Mondays, lunch at Tridel on Tuesdays, and you run the gamut.
Mhm.
And it was great. So I went back with this friend. We had a fraternity formal coming up in a few months, and she wanted me to take one of her friends. But there was this other girl who was really hot and frankly uh available, right? Who I was like, I'm gonna take this girl because it's fraternity formal. I'm not trying to meet my wife. I'm trying to have a good time with no strings attached.
Mhm.
And then I met Kim, and I was like, damn, I'm gonna take her. And I met my wife.
You know, that's your first impression of your future wife. So if you're finding her attractive after she'd been out partying the night before, I mean, that's a keeper.
I was finding her mentally attractive.
Okay.
I
It was the
found
challenge.
it was the challenge, and it was the deference. Like, I'm sure you think you're cool, kid, and I just don't care, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not here looking for you, so you
Right.
do what you want with it. And I was like, oh well, you will be.
So how did that progress? Because you only got 2 more months of school.
Fast. In on April 17th, I remember because that's actually my uncle's birthday and my buddy's birthday. I have a buddy who got really drunk his 21st birthday, and he looks at me and just punched me in the face, hammered drunk, punched me in the face, and he's like, "It's my birthday, so you can't hit me back." And this is a guy who, like, if anybody hit him, he would just crumble. He was not the
Mhm.
he was not the guy you wanted to be out with you if there was a potential of bad things to happen, right? He was
Right.
the guy you want around when things are good. uh, and he manages my parents' money now, for example. Like, that's the guy, right?
Mhm.
So I was like, I'm gonna fucking drop you. And I stepped closer to him, and I was going to hit him, and my wife at the time was not even my girlfriend. She just grabbed me and started making out with me, so I wouldn't hit my friend. And I was like, all right, this is way more fun.
Yeah. That is funny.
Yeah.
So where did she grow up?
She grew up outside of Washington D.C. in a town called Riverdale, which
Mhm.
is sandwiched between Washington D.C. and College Park. So College Park is where University of Maryland is, and Washington D.C. is Washington D.C. And she grew up right in between those two, so about a mile and a half from campus, and maybe 5 miles from the outskirts of D.C.
So how'd you lock this down before you graduated?
I didn't. So well, I did, but you know how I did it. No. So the way I locked it down before I graduated was this is actually this is interesting. I think um, prior to her, I had been on a bit of a streak, and my grandma didn't approve. Right, my grandma was like, "That's not how you treat girls.
Mm-hmm.
They're not one night stands. You don't have sexual relationships with women for a week, 2 weeks, and then find the next one. She's like, you need to have more respect for them than that. And I said, okay, I'll tell you what. The next girl I do that with, that'll be my wife. And I was half fucking around.
Mm-hmm.
What I meant was not that'll be my wife. What I meant was I'll take her seriously. Right?
Right.
I want you to respect me, so I will respect the next girl. And so in order for me to allow myself to have any kind of sexual relationship with my wife, I had to know that I was ready to lock it down and have her be the only one for a while.
Did you communicate this with her?
I did.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, she wasn't interested in that.
Okay.
She was coming out of a long-term relationship that was long distance and wanted just like get in, get out, see you later.
Mm-hmm.
So I made her wait. Made her wait a long time. So after that incident that I just described to you, we actually didn't see each other for about 3 weeks because I accidentally gave her the wrong phone number at the end of the night. I typed the wrong number into her phone. I was one digit off. It was like the number next to the number that I was trying to give her. You may or may not remember the days when you had to put like, if I want to give you this, like, push 3 times, right?
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
So I saw her walk into a taco shop or a burrito shop. And I was like, hey, so thanks for never calling me. She's like, oh, thanks for never calling me back. I did call you and left you a message. And then she went into her phone log. I'm like, oh, you did. I don't have a voicemail on. And I looked at it and I'm like, that's not my number. Oh, God. So then we started making up for lost time and hung out a lot more. And she tried to break up with me at her sorority formal in DuPont Circle. On the bus ride back from the formal, she was like, I wish you didn't live in New York. Like, why not? She's like, because then we could stay together. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? We're not breaking up. And she's like, yes, we are. I live in Maryland. You live in New York. We're not going to do a long distance relationship. I said, yes, we are. And she's like, why? No, we're not. She's like, yes, we are. I said, let me ask you a question. Are you saying that we're going to break up? Because the likelihood is high that if we are living long distance, we will have problems that might lead to us breaking up down the line. She said, yeah. I said, well, then if we have problems, let's just break up. Right now, we don't have problems. So let's not.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, is this guy really not going to let me break up with him? And the answer is yes. I was really not going to let her break up with me. So she knew she didn't want to live at home after college. And she worked the summer in Dewey Beach, Delaware, where she was planning to be, single, cute chick, hooking up with random dudes all the time. And now she had a boyfriend that she was going to be loyal to. And by, I want to say September, it may have been October, she had moved from Maryland to New York to be closer to me.
So do you all live together when she moves up to New York?
No.
No.
I was still living with my parents. I was in the in-between year between college and chiropractic school, working at Equinox as a personal trainer. And, well, actually, I was working at another place, and she helped. This is when I really started to know, like, this is a different kind of woman. I was working at a gym where I unknowingly sold a bag of steroids from behind the counter to a member. And I remember coming home and telling her about it. And she's like, you have to get out of there. And I wasn't really thinking about that. She's like, you have to get out of there. I'm like, do I? Yes. Like, nothing good is going to happen there. And she was like, you should go interview at an Equinox or something. We talk about them all the time. I'm like, yeah, just go interview at an Equinox. It's like, why not? And so I did. And that's the job that I got. And so that's when I was like, okay, she's going to make me a better person. It's not just about, good sex. She's hot and she's cool. My friends like her. She's going to make me a better person.
She's already challenging you to be better.
Yeah. And so I then, it's funny. She moved to New York, and then the following September, a year later, I moved upstate New York to go to chiropractic school, and she was left living where she moved to be closer to me, with me 5 hours away by drive. And she just tapped into my social circle, and now all my friends were her friends, and they liked her better than they liked me anyway. So it worked out.
All these important females in your life, like everyone likes the females in your life better than you, it sounds like.
I'm
Your
a
sister.
I'm an acquired taste man.
This is
It's
true.
okay. I know this about myself. Our social life now is largely the friends that my wife makes, and then they bring their husband over, and it's like a little tryout. And it's not that I'm judging them for like, are they cool enough to hang out with us? It's we try out hanging out as a four, and we see like, do we like hanging out with each other? Is there good conversation there? Do we press each other to get better at things? And there are, we live in a town now where a lot of people grew up together in this
Mhm.
town, and we didn't. We moved here, and so it's difficult to tap into social circles where people have known each other since they're in elementary school, and you're the new one, right? Even if you're a friend, you're a layer out.
Right.
And so she's really good at finding couples who are also a layer out, who have kids similar age. And she knows, I don't care if you make $1 million, $10 million, or $500 a month. I don't care about your income. I don't care about how nice your house is, what kind of car you drive. Are you trying to be excellent at something? If you're trying to be excellent at something, I want to know you. And she just knows I'm not bringing anybody around our house who isn't trying to be excellent at something.
Right. So what does she do?
She was a teacher. She was a biology teacher in a special ed classroom. So what the way it works in New York is there are kids who are special needs who are um, too, they don't have enough functional capacity to be in a regular classroom. And then there are kids who have too much capacity to be in a contained class and not enough capacity to just follow the lead in a regular class. They call that inclusion. Her responsibility was those kids in the mainstream class.
Okay.
Follow?
Hmm.
So she was responsible for teaching biology to the special ed kids in a regular biology class. She was dual certified special ed and biology. Um, she did that for some time in a school where it was fairly low income, and she ran into the problems of calling the parents to say, "Hey, your kid's struggling," and they're like, "What do you call me about this for?" And she's like, "Oh man, this sucks." But she loved the kids. They were cool. They would ride her. It was a lot like where she grew up. And then she ended up getting a much more stable job because every year she would get fired and then rehired, and there were no raises. She ended up getting a much more stable job at one of the highest paying school districts on Long Island, making $100,000 a year plus as a teacher, doing the same job. The commute was about an hour and 15 minutes away, but she did it because she loved it. And then when we had our third kid, and our third kid turned 2 years old, we were looking at each other. It was during COVID. She had her last year teaching it at home. We looked at each other and she's like, I don't want to go back to that commute. Like, then stop chasing the money. What do you want to do? She's like, I want to be a mom. I can be a mom. So now she's an incredible mom of three and wife.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's get back to you. So you go to chiropractic school.
Mhm.
So what do you do? I mean, you're in school. Are you working anywhere?
So no, there's no time. Not, I mean, I guess there are some people who are smarter than me who had the time, but I think people would stand to value learning what happens in a chiropractic school, right? So college, you're taking between 12 and 14 credits a semester to be a full-time student. And those classes, we all know one of them is sociology, one of them is family studies, and then one of them is hard, right? And you're like, oh, I got a hard test tomorrow. Oh, I got family studies tomorrow. Ah, fuck it. Let's get drunk tonight and go out to the bar,
Hmm.
right? Chiropractic school is 25 credits a semester, and every class is microbiology, pathology, anatomy, neuroanatomy. It is no joke.
Yeah.
No joke. Um, 3 days a week, you are in a cadaver lab for 3 hours a day, where the kinds of questions that you're getting, and you're dissecting the body. Like, I mean, I'm talking. I've been elbow deep in a guy's abdomen, cutting the liver off of his body and pulling it out. I have taken a guy's head and rolled his scalp back, sawed open the skull cap, pulled the brain out, and then taken my hand to the inside of his forehead and a handsaw and sawed his face in half so it would splay open so we could see all of the cranial nerves on either side of the brain. And then we had to be able to understand in chiropractic school, the way that a lab test would work is you would think of them as three different kinds of questions. Question number one would be, what muscle is this? There's a pin in a muscle, right?
Mhm.
A type 2 question would be, which nerve, if damaged, would affect the function of this muscle, right? So now it's like, okay, well, that nerve, that muscle is innervated by the nerve root of C6, so it would be C6. Okay. A type 3 question would be, which behavior would be most affected, or which activity would be most affected by damage to this structure, or whatever the case might be. Now you have to think about, like, okay, it's necessary for this, and this. This is the best answer, and they're not multiple choice. You're filling these in.
Right.
Chiropractic school for me was a rude awakening, because I coasted through college. I did not work hard in college. I got to chiropractic school, thought it would be the same thing. I found myself studying my face off just to get by. Just to get by. I did not graduate top of my class. We started our class with 124 kids in it. We graduated 77.
Dang.
Yeah. And if you fail a class, you end up taking a semester all over again, which is another 3 months on site, or 3.5 months on site, and $10,000 minimum. So like it's high stress.
Yeah.
I don't remember where we got to that question, but I thought it was important that people knew what it takes to actually get through that kind of school. We do more anatomy, more neurobiology than medical doctors in their school.
I
And that's
was
not,
asking if you were working while you were in school.
yeah, I didn't have time.
Yeah.
I worked when
Really?
I got out of school, and I came to your last year is internship. So you're in a clinic, you're treating patients under the supervision of another doctor. You're telling them, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And they're like, okay, go ahead and do it. And then if you do it badly, they come in and they do it. Right. And in that, there's a lot less workload, right? All of your workload now is prepping for boards, board exams, or your national certification exams, so that you can have a license. So while I was doing that, it was like Monday mornings, Tuesday afternoons, Wednesday mornings, Thursday afternoons, Friday mornings. I would do the opposite schedule working at Equinox as a full-time personal trainer.
Okay. So you finished chiropractic school, then what?
Finished chiropractic school, went into practice with my father and my uncle for a salary of like $300 a month plus whatever business I brought in.
Straight commission.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep.
So how long were you with them before you realized you want to go out and do your own thing?
Almost 2 years.
Okay.
I mean, 5 minutes, but almost 2 years to do it.
Yeah. So how did you come up with this hybrid model of not?
So my buddy was, I remember I was a personal trainer now at this point in 2011. I'd been a personal trainer since 2010, let's say, is when I really started thinking about it. So in 2010, I'd been a personal trainer now for 6 years. And so I always knew I wanted fitness to be an element of my program. I forget the guy's name. I wish I remembered. There was a doctor at the time who was like, this is the early days of the internet selling things to you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a doctor whose website was like Dr. Whatever. That was it. Just Dr. his name. I was like, I should get that URL for my name right now. But I didn't know how to do that. And it was like, why am I going to bother? I don't even know how I would use it. So I didn't do it. But I knew I wanted fitness to be a part of what I did. And I knew that when you look at these monstrosity businesses out there, I knew I didn't have the capital to compete or to even start, nor the skill. I had no skills in terms of business. My buddy, when I was in chiropractic school, we had this thing that we called the Meathead Roundtable, which was all the guys who were certified personal trainers would go to dinner once a month. We do a potluck and we would talk about fitness trends just to keep ourselves sharp on that, because it was so much other work. And CrossFit was the thing that was kind of starting to pop. The 2008 CrossFit Games was the thing, and then 2009. So I remember judging that so hard and being like, these people move like trash. Why would I ever want to be a part of that? And then I started doing it just to see what it was. And I got the bug. I joined a CrossFit gym on Long Island in 2010 called CrossFit Garden City. My first day, I walked in with basketball sneakers on. And they're like, you're not going to want to wear shoes with bubbles in the heel, right? To do push presses. So I would recommend, if you're going to come here more often, to get a flat pair of shoes. I did. And then I was like, I want to open one of these. This doesn't look expensive. Like, I used to work at Equinox.
Right.
I know they spent $25 million to open the one that I worked at. That was no way I'm raising that. But this, you guys are in a hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much could they possibly have spent? I do the mental math. I'm like, I'm doing it. So I had a buddy who was really good at CrossFit living in Pennsylvania, who I convinced to move back to Long Island to open, and he was going to operate the CrossFit gym because he was already running one in Pennsylvania. My thought was, he must know how to do it. And I was going to run the clinic. So the way we did it was, you coach 85% of the classes. I'll coach 15% of the classes. You're responsible for all of the things. I'm responsible for all the marketing and sales. I'll run my clinic. I get 15% of the money. You get 85% of the money. That's how we started. Big
Were
mistake.
the two businesses connected to each other?
There could not have been a worse environment for a chiropractic clinic. Yes, we were separated by a sheetrock wall that did not even span the entire length of the building. And so if we were doing cleans, for example, or anything where the barbell was dropping, deadlifts especially, and I was treating a patient on a table in a room on the other side of that wall, it was as if we were on a boat that was going like 60 miles an hour on choppy seas.
Yeah.
We were bouncing around. I'd be like, I'll talk to you after they finish this part of the workout.
That's how much you loved CrossFit.
No, that's how naive and dumb I was. When I didn't realize it would be such a hindrance on the environment for the clinic. But now, at the same time, I was, at this point, I had been seeing patients for 3 years before we opened our clinic, and I was actually fairly good. I wasn't great by any stretch, but I was very confident. I knew how to speak to people, patients at least, and I was a good practitioner, and so people came anyway. I was seeing
Right.
70 patients a week.
Do you think you would have had that success though if you didn't get that head start on the CrossFit gym being connected?
Yeah, I think the CrossFit gym was a hindrance.
I'm saying, do you, like, let's say you have 0 patients and then you're connected to this CrossFit gym. Like, do you think you build your patient client base up with a gym attached to it?
No, I follow you. I think the gym slowed my rate of growth.
Got you. Okay. Your story is so much like Brian Strump. I had him on the podcast, and same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sit there and put his chiropractic office right next to the gym. So,
yep.
All right. So, did you finally decide to separate the two so you can have 2 entities that are running at a more professional level?
No, that was not a decision. That was a forced situation. So anyone who knows their New York history, in the year 2011, things were great. In the year 2012, Hurricane Sandy came up the coast and wiped out my town. So when Hurricane Sandy came, for small background, we had just been sued. Our next door neighbor in May of 2012 sued us for making too much noise. He was right. We were loud. But he lied in court, so we won. He made it very easy to tear him apart and make him not credible. And so we won the lawsuit. October 25th, I get the letter like, this is the new law. You are written into the law. You're good. This is heck. October 30th, Hurricane Sandy comes and just wipes us off the face of the planet. 6 feet of water, human feces, sludge in our building. My clinic is gone. My gym is gone. I don't have the appropriate insurances. I had hurricane insurance, but not flood insurance. I didn't know the difference. And my home was gone. And so we were forced to rethink things. And we were actually so successful early on that we were looking to open a second location. And we'd already taken lease on this second location that also flooded. But there was we hadn't done any construction there yet. So who cares? We had to demo everything anyway. So we just moved there.
Okay.
And when I say just, I'm simplifying the fact that we had to spend another $90,000 in construction, not including my clinic. I had to raise money from friends and family. And we operated without a license, like without a CO for 7 years. I didn't get the CO until I sold.
Wow. You come a long way in 10 years.
Yeah. I hope,
A lot
my
to go
hope
through.
is that 10 years from now, I look back and I'm like, damn, you were just as as naive by comparison 10 years
Mhm.
ago to now that you were 10 years ago to then.
So is that the biggest obstacle you've ever overcome?
Sandy?
Hmm.
I don't know. Um, I mean, COVID is not dissimilar to Sandy, right? In terms of everyone got to experience that one together, so that made it a little bit different. It also made it a little bit harder because in Sandy there was a lot of like, let's help these guys out. Not money, but Rogue and again Faster sent us new equipment, and by new equipment I mean equipment that we didn't previously own, right? Equipment that they had used that was not in great shape, but that was better than our stuff that was now rusty and covered in human shit.
Right.
So that was helpful. In COVID, there was none of that. No one was like, "Oh, you have it really hard. Let us help." And my again, this is what I'm proud of this, even though it was a move I probably shouldn't have made the way I did. It was hasty. I just decided that I remember how much people helped us before in Sandy, and I wanted to do the same for people during COVID. So we started giving everything away. We gave away almost $2 million worth of education. We gave away our influence in that every week I had my network. I asked the favor. I called in the favors, right? The ones that you stock up, that you're not even looking, like you're not even meaning to stock it up, but
Hmm.
like calling Justin Sua and saying, "Hey man, I know we're not close friends, but we chat from time to time. Would you mind jumping on a meeting with me on a Wednesday to talk to the community of people who I'm trying to raise up while they deal with this?" Yeah, man, I'll come on, no problem. Rachel Balkovec, right? E.C. Sinkowski, these people came out and supported the community because they're good people and because I asked them to. We had given away all of the product, the educational product that we planned to sell over the next year. And so now we found ourselves in the situation where I'm like, great, what do we do?
Yeah.
Right? We now we've given everything away. We even raised, I think it was somewhere around $30,000 for affiliates. By what we did, we sold our bulletproof programs, and we said, if you buy this now, and then you enter the name of your gym on the purchase page, we will give them 50% of the money that you are paying to us. No, I take it back. It was 100% of the money.
Well.
So we gave all of that money. We would call affiliates and be like, "Hey, we have a check for you for $500," and they'd say, "Whatever, like fuck you." We're like, "No, no, 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 seriously. Like, it's not a scam. You don't have to give me your email. You don't have to give me your bank account or credit card. Just give me your address where you would like me to send you a check." Because I didn't want to send checks to a gym that they weren't going into because the gym was closed.
Right.
So I was like, I just want to know where you want us to send a check. And we were just mailing checks out to gyms.
It's great.
And it was cool. Um, and that was like the reason I'm saying it was more difficult during COVID was because after all of that was over, I was like, okay, now how do we run a business now?
Yeah.
Like I wasn't sure anything about what to sell. At this point, I'm like, like how do I sell to people? And in New York, COVID was not what COVID was in Texas or in Florida or Arkansas or Missouri, what it was in New York. So I'm trying to gauge what everybody else is going through, what people here are going through. How do we start charging again? All of that kind of stuff. It was difficult.
So I know you gave away with like genuinely. What did you get in return from it?
No idea.
To be determined.
Yeah, it wasn't. There was no expectation of something in return.
Of course.
It was. You know, I know what it's like to be down, and I felt like we were in a position to lift people up, and so we did. And I don't know, goodwill maybe. I'll
Mhm.
tell you this much: I was recently on the Gabrielle Lyon podcast, and one of the things she said to me on the most meaningful thing that she said to me on the show, and she said a lot of really nice. She said that she believes that what we're doing in Active Life has an opportunity to transform the fitness and healthcare industries. And what stands out to me more than that is that she said, you have a very good reputation. Everyone I talk to about you says that you're generous, you're a great connector, you're really smart, all those things. And I paused because I didn't know how I wanted to take that. Because I think that in 2016, 17, nobody would have said that. Nobody would have said that. People would have said he's smart, but that guy's fucking brash. And
So how have you changed in 5 to 6 years?
how have I changed, or how have I changed that?
Both.
I've changed. I hired a mentor who taught me that I need to stop treating people the way I want to be treated, because the way I want to be treated is very direct, is very harsh. Because I loathe wasting time, and to me, I don't want the flowery language. Not that there's anything wrong with flowery language. I don't want the compliment sandwich. I just want you to tell me what I need to improve and how to do it if you know. I would talk to people that way. I didn't understand that for some people, simply saying the word no to me was a high conflict conversation for them. Because for me, you haven't offended me until you punched me in the face. It literally goes about that far. I recently heard that someone, I won't even mention the name because I don't need to give them any clout, absolutely trashed me on a podcast for like 20 minutes personally.
Wow.
I didn't listen. Stu told me. I didn't listen to it. I won't listen to it. I don't care. Right? But the point that I'm making there is, in the past, that is something I see, I hear, I pounce. I'm like, let me go on this one. Let's talk this one through. Let me just pound you into mental submission. And I just don't care anymore. Like I'm not. People want to be treated the way that they want to be treated. I had a mentor teach me that, and then I spent the next 7 years, and I'm still doing it now, learning how people want to be treated individually by asking better questions, by taking better action, by making sure I'm clear on what they're saying to me, and then by giving without the expectation of getting anything in return.
It's just like, I'll tell you, this meant a lot to me. I'm in bed that night and you'd listen to that podcast that I'd mentioned you on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wake up and Stu's text me, you've direct messaged me, you've sent me a text. I mean, it's crazy. Like, you're doing big things out there. And here you are, like, doing everything you can to give your time to someone. But you just said you hate wasting time.
I don't see that as a waste of time. So what happened was, I forget what the context of the conversation. You mentioned that I'm one of the guys you were trying to get on your podcast.
Yep.
And I thought you sounded like a guy who was taking himself seriously. Like you had intention in your podcast. The way I can tell that is the way you were, like, the things you were talking to Stu about, the way you were talking about them, what your audio sounded like, all the things were there. I have no idea how many downloads you get, and I don't care. You mentioned that I was someone that you wanted to talk to on the show. And so I thought it would be irresponsible of me to do anything except find a way to get myself on the show with you. And I don't see that as a waste of time, because I learn from conversations with all people. And I want to learn how to do things, not how to not do things, for most of my conversations.
That's awesome. And I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So we've got about 10 more minutes left. I want to talk about active life. So you're running this gym, you're running your chiropractic business. Like, where did the active life?
I was on a walk with my dog after we lost everything. And the name of my clinic at the time was Thrive Long Beach Chiropractic. I hated that name. The name of the gym was CrossFit King of the Beach. I hated that even more. But there was nothing I could do about that, because my business partner loved it. I'm like, all right, whatever, we'll go with it. But I knew I could reinvent myself, the business I owned 100% of. And so I said, what do I want to help people do? I want to help people live an active life. What if I don't call the place anything chiropractic? What if I call the place Active Life? And then underneath it, I have Active Life Chiropractic and Soft Tissue. I have Active Life Education, Active Life Business, Active Life, whatever. If I just, like, if Active Life is me, and then everything else that I do lives underneath Active Life, that could be, I'm walking my dog, blue leash, she's pissing in a tree. I call my mom because she's really smart. She graduated from University of Pennsylvania and NYU in 3 years. I call her, like, what do you think of this? Do you think it's a mistake? Do you think I should call it, Island Park Chiropractic? She's like, no, if you think it works, do it. So that's where the name Active Life was born. About 2 years later, I buy my business partner out of the gym and rename the place from CrossFit King of Island Park to Active Life Athletics, CrossFit Island Park. And that's where Active Life started to be born. Now, when people were coming into town to work with us, they knew what to call it. It didn't matter which place they were in; it was Active Life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if it was an athlete coming out, a CrossFit Games athlete coming out for work with me, they weren't like, "Oh, I was at CrossFit Island Park working with Dr. Sean from Active Life." It was just I'm an Active Life.
Right.
And I made everything way easier for everybody.
So one of the first times I heard about you personally was when you and Stu did the was it PT First?
Yeah.
But I'd seen your social media content through one of the gym owners in town and him resharing it. And so what's that?
Who was that?
His name is Rob Stacy.
Okay.
So he's no longer a gym owner here in town, but he's a baseball coach at a high school in Knoxville.
Okay.
Anyway, he would repost.
I know who he is. I'm fairly certain he came to one of our seminars in New York.
Redheaded guy.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Anyway, but I would see these social media posts and they kind of were like Stu's. They're kind of fiery and direct to the point.
Yep.
So like, what made you start really pumping this social media handle instead of just focusing on your local market?
My sister. My sister told me that I needed an Instagram account. I was like, that's stupid. That's where girls go to post pictures. And she's like, you're an idiot. Get an Instagram account. So I did. And the person who blew me up on Instagram was Chrissy Maycag, formerly Donuts and Deadlifts.
Okay.
So she became a patient of mine in New York, and she would come into the clinic. And one day she took a picture while I was working on some of her intercostal muscles, and she posted it to Instagram. And I woke up the next morning at 1,000 new followers. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I went from like 200 people, and most of them are family, to 1,000 people I've never heard of before. I'm like, I made it. That's it. I'm here. I made it. And I got hooked on it. And then it was, people would start asking me questions, and I would just start posting the answers to their questions as posts. And I've always, and by the way, I know you said we have 10 more minutes. Just to give you a heads up, I can go another 15 from now if you wanted to. I don't need to.
I knew how our conversation went last time, so I actually booked it for an hour and 15.
Perfect. I always had a problem with the accounts out there that are, and I still do, that are spitting out stuff that is too general, or too specific, right? So the idea that like, hey, if your knee hurts, do this, like, or not, or that could be the worst thing in the world for your knee. And so the account was as fiery at the time as I was. It was probably toned down 2 levels from my level of fieriness. And it's because I wanted to cut through the noise and be like, this is all bullshit. There isn't something that works for everybody.
And there weren't specific posts that I remember, but I remember you weren't as like, your language was a lot calmer than Stu's, but you would read a post that you would put out there and it would just like get you thinking or just kind of sting a little bit. Yep. But not like to the point like you're pissed at that person.
No, like
you're just like, I'm definitely going to read the caption underneath to see what he's talking about.
When I would post something like, for example, if you have low back pain and you can't do 50% the number of step-ups on your left that you can do on your right at the same weight, you probably shouldn't squat anymore. Something like that. And then the caption would say you should do step-ups instead. Here's why. That's an example of what you're talking about.
Right.
And I was actually thinking about this on my walk in this morning. I was wondering if we were going to talk about this. I remember there was a podcast at the time that I don't think is a podcast anymore, from a group of 3 doctors who were big in the CrossFit space at the time. And they used to call me out all the time. Where is your peer-reviewed literature on? I was like, I don't have any, man. I just think it makes sense that if I can do 20 step-ups on my left to a 20-inch box with 95 pounds in the front rack, and I can only do that twice on my right leg, it makes sense to fix those. And our anecdotal experience is that when people do that, their squat goes up
Right.
and their pain goes away. So I don't need your validation through third-party peer-reviewed literature that what I just saw works. And I'm not telling anybody that I have it. And so they were like, do you want to come on the podcast and talk about it? I'm like, you're fucking right, I do. But I listened to their podcast once they asked me to come on, and it was a gotcha show. So they would listen to someone, a guest, and then they would be like, oh, well, do you know about this? And like, oh, well, you know, and they had to the guest had to back their way out of whatever they just said. And they always made the guest look stupid. Probably why they don't have a show anymore. But I said to them, I'm like, hey, you know what I think would be a really good idea? I said, well, I said, let's do a pre-show interview. Let's do an interview before the interview. Because I'm curious the kind of things you're going to bring up. Like, we don't usually do that. I'm like, well, I think we should. Because I want to make sure that this show goes well and that you decide to air it. Like, why wouldn't we air it? And I was like, I'd hate for you to look stupid on your own podcast. So they're like, okay. We get on a call. One of the guys is a doctor at Stanford, right? And I told him he's going to look stupid on his own podcast. We get on a call. Like, so what do you want to talk about? I'm like, well, one of the things I would like to bring up on the podcast is I know you guys are going to ask me about the literature around things like step-ups because that's the post that really pissed you off. Like, yeah. It's okay. How many of you guys took a shower this week? They all raised their hand. Like, we talk, like, what's the point? Like, just go with me for a second. Like, how many of you guys took a shower this week? They all raised their hand. Like, okay. How many of you guys, why do you take showers? Hygiene, right? It's showers are proven to what yada yada. Okay, great. Have you ever had your water tested? For what? I'm just asking if anybody has come into your house and tested your water to make sure that it's clean. No. Has anybody ever tested your soap? No. Has anybody ever tested your skin before and after a shower? Double-blind study made sure that your skin was actually cleaner when you got out than when you got in. No. Then why do you hold yourself to a standard that is less than the standard you're holding me to, where you do something every day that you have no empirical evidence works? I do something with people who are looking for a solution that commonsensically, if I can do 20 on the left and 2 on the right, they should probably even those out. And you come at me. How does that align? They canceled the podcast.
How much longer did that call last?
Less than a minute. But I had been on podcasts leading up to that one that didn't air. And I was like, wow, it's a waste of my time to get on a podcast with you that's not going to air. Just because we disagreed about something. I recently had a guy who interviewed me on a podcast. I actually thought it went very well. I wasn't inflammatory. It was modern day me. And he sent me an email afterwards. He's like, hey, we don't think our listeners are going to like some of the things that you said, so we're not going to air the podcast. I was like, okay.
You didn't say anything controversial?
No, not in my mind. Right. Wow. And nothing more controversial than anything we said on this podcast was said on that one.
Wow.
Yeah. But I was like, all right, no problem. It was a small show with a guy and a woman who were hosting, and I went on because a friend of mine asked me to do them a favor and go on. Mm-hmm. And a friend of a friend, I'm like, sure, whatever. And they sent the email like, all right, you got a fragile audience, bro.
Did you use language in the podcast?
No. Because I asked before when I haven't listened to a show if there's language that they like to avoid using, and they're like, yeah, if we can keep it kind of clean, like no problem.
Who knows?
I actually haven't thought about it until this conversation.
You're doing okay then.
Thanks.
All right, let's talk about these kids of yours.
Oh man.
Yeah.
The best teachers I have. I was actually interviewing a guy named Dr. Mark Chang this week. And I told him off air, he and I were talking about some of the things that we struggle with. And I was telling him one of the things that I do when I want to get through something I'm struggling with is I'll ask my 5-year-old and my 4-year-old. Daddy doesn't know how to do this. how could I do it better? And it could be like, hey, daddy wants to get on the Joe Rogan podcast. You're like, why don't you just call him?
Mhm.
That's the kind of thing that they'll say, right? And I'm like, I don't have his phone number. And they're like, do any of your friends have his phone number? Maybe they could give it to you. And I'm like, you know what? I do have friends who have his phone number. Um, but I don't think I should ask my friends to give me his phone number because it's not theirs to give out. And they're like, well, did you send them a message on the phone? Like, did you send them a message on Instagram? And what will happen is they don't get me to Joe Rogan,
Of course.
but they get me to open my mind to like, there are some simple things I could do that I'm not doing. Why don't you ask your friends? Well, I posted yesterday in my story, what podcasts should I go on in 2023 where you think I could bring value to the host and the guests?
Mhm.
I'm already in conversations with podcast hosts I never would have reached out to if my friends had not told me reach out to these.
There you go.
And so that's a great use of kids with an imagination without the constraints.
So 9, 5, and 4. Is that right?
I have 8, soon to be 6, just turned 4.
Okay.
And I'll bring the 8-year-old in too, but she's a little bit too pragmatic about things. Like she'll be like, might take you a while, Dad. That's okay.
Mhm.
You're right. You're right.
So how do you manage time with growing a business and still being a good dad?
My wife is incredible, and she carries a lot of the load. So there's that. When I'm home with my kids, I'm very intentional with it. Right? My phone is. I'm not talking to them while I'm on my phone. I actually listened to an episode of Rachel Balkovec's podcast back in the day when she had Gabby Reese on, and Gabby Reese was talking about how would you feel if a 14-year-old who you were talking to was on their phone while they were answering? Well, why would they not do that if they watched you do it to them from
Right.
ages 3 to 14? Damn, never gonna
Yeah,
care
you've
my phone.
conditioned them.
Yep. So when I'm with my kids, I'm very present. My wife knows that I'm a great dad for an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. And after that, I'm not engaged. It's too much of the same thing. And unless if we are doing something,
Mhm.
it starts to cost me energy instead of giving me energy. And so our relationship is in such a way that I'm able to see my kids in the morning and hang out with them and like cuddle with them on the couch, cook them breakfast, talk about what they're going to do that day, and then see them after school when I get home at night before they go to bed, and talk about how was your day, what'd you learn today, and then put them into bed, read them a book, lay with them while they fall asleep, and then spend all weekend with them. And so when I'm with my kids, it's really focused time. And I had this conversation with Pat Barber recently, a year ago, where I told him I'm a 90-minute dad during the week, and I'm all on all weekend. He's like, 90 minutes isn't a lot of time. I'm like, 90 minutes, no phone, no TV, 90 minutes of me asking questions of my kids and getting answers from them, and doing arts and crafts together, and laying in bed and talking about what they're afraid of, and actually coaching, like being a professional coach for my kids. It's a lot of time, and I don't think most parents spend it.
Not at all.
I think most parents spend much more time with much less quality and intention.
Right.
And he was like, damn, okay, that's different. Now on the weekends, my wife and I tried to plan to do things with our kids, like go on on a long walk in nature somewhere, or go to the beach, or go to a museum, or whatever the case is, because then it's things are moving, and I'm really happy to spend that time.
Cool.
I'm also a husband first.
It's even more important.
Yeah, it's. I had a mentor who asked me one time if I'm married. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you sure? What kind of question is that? Yes, I'm sure. He's like, 100% sure. I'm like, yeah. So in this moment, right now, your wife is not filing divorce papers. I'm like, no. Why would she be though? He's like, I don't know. I'm not saying she is. What I'm saying is, she woke up today and chose either to be with you or not. What did you do to influence that decision? Because there are a lot of guys who don't see it coming. And then one day their wife is like, I want a divorce. So what did you do today to earn her decision to be a no-brainer? It's a yes.
Love it.
And so for me, I'm a husband first, I'm a father second, I'm a business owner third.
That's great. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up.
Happy to.
So I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure, Brad.
Yep. We'll be in touch soon. Better Everyday Podcast listeners, thank you for tuning in.